Here we are building screens. This is building screens for dummies. Start with a kit that has all the parts except the screen. We just found that to be easier. We're replacing the screen frame, but the frame itself has a different width. So it recommends that we measure like from here to here and then subtract 1.5 inches because that's about what the little corner brackets together make up about 1.5 inches. My recommendation is anytime you do a cut, put in the new end pieces and just lay it on top of the screen to make sure that you have perfectly replicated this shape, even though you're using different lengths because you have different widths. The spline from the piece before you start cutting and measuring. It's just nice to have the longer pieces of spline to work from. The Sharpie, measure your distance, use the right angle to make sure you have a nice straight line. You mark it with the Sharpie, and then you need a hacksaw. We have found that it was, for me at least, the junior, like toy hacksaw. It's just a junior hacksaw. It was like $8. Worked way better. So that's the one I recommend. Also, when you're measuring and you're gonna cut, so I'm right-handed, so I'm gonna cut from here to here. It's really hard if you start it from here. This is a hard edge to cut from. Much easier to start from this nice rounded edge. Cut our pieces and we put our little clips on the top. See, this is the new screen, this is the old screen. We cut them, we put our corners on, and then we measure it up to the old screen, compare it exactly, and make sure it fits. What do you know? Perfect fit. Here's the part that no one tells you about. The screen, if you just laid the screen on and put in the spline, it would be so tight, it would warp the frame. And then you get to start over. You have to cut new pieces. So the key is taking out of the old screen one of the lengths, and we make it as a crossbar. It keeps you from being able to make it so tight, or at least you are alerted that the screening will become so tight if that bar doesn't come out easily. So we put that in there. We will lay the screen over, we'll run the spline, but we'll constantly be checking. We'll keep our hand on the screen on the inside to keep it from getting too tight. And this crossbar will keep us from warping the ends. You always want to put the crossbar on the longest side. And since it comes right out of the old screen, it's always the perfect length. So it would be really great if we could do both, but we can't do both. You have to pick one. So the longest end, we have a crossbar. It'll keep us from warping that end and we'll be able to keep the screen at the right tension. We're getting ready to put in the spline. So up here, maybe you can see it, we have the little hooks, the little spring action on the top, and we have the pull tabs on the bottom. We have our crossbar, and we have plenty of screen. It's amazing how much it pulls in on the side, so we have plenty. One thing to keep in mind when you spline this, if it's too tight or there's something wrong, it ripples or whatever, pull the spline out, reposition the screen, and just do it again. You don't have to throw away the spline and you don't have to throw away the screen. Another tip, we found that the plastic roller is way better, for us at least, than the metal one. And I'll tell you why. With the metal one, when you're rolling in that spline, if you deviate ever so slightly, it slices the screen. Plastic one, way more forgiving. You can roll on, or I always get the wrong end. You can roll on the spline, and even if you happen to like move a little to right or left, it does not cut the screen. So here we've only just done from that end of the spline to here, and now here's that crossbar, here's that halfway point, and we're just making sure that it's not too tight. It's amazing how fast it tightens up. So I just ran into the end of my first piece, and all I have to do is stick the next piece of spline Oops, right in there. And keep going. Okay, we just finished putting in the spline. I haven't even cut it yet because we're just looking real close to make sure nothing is too tight. Now, see, it's nice. There's flexibility all along here, so I don't think if we pull this bar out that it's going to warp. That's right. We have to go back and re-push in the spline on the hooks. So Gordon always does that. And then when we're satisfied, we cut the spline, and then I'll show you the cool cutting tool we use to cut the apron off of this screen. So this is the handy dandy cutting tool. Every video I watched said, oh, just use an X-Acto knife. Let me just say I was not good with the X-Acto knife, but this blade makes cutting really easy. So can you hold this and I'll show? So you can see the blade right there. Get it nice and under here. And all I do is drag it along, holding the screening. And look, it comes right off perfectly. It's cut. We've cut off the excess. It took about 30 seconds and the screen is done. Now you might say, oh look, there's flex in that. Yeah, if there isn't, it bends these aluminum frames and pretty soon you've got this curved frame. We have a whole bucket of bad frames from when we screened them too tight. It just bows the frame and you can't fix that. So in wrapping up our adventure in replacing all of our screens, we made many mistakes because we didn't know what we were doing. So all told, with all the mistakes, all the screens we had to rebuild and redo because they were warped or whatever we did wrong, it came out to about $30 a screen. We figure if we hadn't made some mistakes, maybe it'd been more like $20 a screen or something like that. So anyway, cheaper than having it done by somebody else. By the time we got good, we did 17 screens. Successfully did 17 screens. By the time we got done, we could do a screen in a half hour. When we began, it took us about 2 hours and we usually did it wrong. So we definitely got better at it as time went on and it really ended up being kind of a fun project. And we're still married, so all good.